Welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast, where we break down the practical strategies of this emerging science, starting with healthy light habits and going wherever the quantum superhighway takes us. So, being on a health and wellness journey is a lot of fun a lot of the time, but it can also, I think, become a little bit treacherous because we maybe get caught up in this idea of getting better and better all the time. And there's never a finish line. And we're always just like, oh, what's the next thing? And so that's why I really wanted to have my guest, Gwen Dittmar, on today and talk about her area of specialty, which is quantum human design. So human design is something I just learned about on this podcast, along as Gwen explained it, and it's a system of personal growth and under a way to understand ourselves. And it's sort of a combination of astrology, I Ching, the chakra system, the Kabbalah, all different kinds of spiritual technologies integrated into one chart. And what I love about this is that it really helps us to understand ourselves. And when we understand ourselves, we have a lot more compassion for ourselves. We have more compassion for ourselves, we have more compassion for other people. Even just listening to Gwen explain a few of the details of my own chart, which she did before we got on the podcast. So you're all going to get some intimate knowledge of how I work, but I trust you. So I'm willing to do that. Just listening to her explain how some of these things work, right? You think of someone in your life and you're like, oh, right. That's why that person is like that. Like it's not personal. So what I love about these systems, um, you know, whether it's a personality test or something with much more depth, like uh, the human design system, is that it really helps us to not take other people so personally because we understand at a deeper level how they're constructed and what makes them tick. And we also learn that about ourselves, so we can be less hard on ourselves and not have expectations that are completely unrealistic for who we are designed to be. So I think any conversation that opens up those avenues is so important. And that's why I loved having it. And I loved having Gwen on. Gwen is super interesting. Like a lot of the guests on this podcast, she started out in one area and then completely went in another direction. So her original career was in pharmaceuticals and biotech research and consulting. But along the way, she followed her passion. She now has a master's in spiritual psychology. She has certifications in professional coaching, quantum human design, Reiki, and breath work. She does one-on-one coaching as well as leading workshops for all kinds of companies, Fortune 100 companies. And so she's really combined all of her life experience into something that is truly aligned with her passion. So here is Gwen. Enjoy this episode. She's delightful. And I really invite you to hear what resonates for you and honor the insights that you have about yourself, because really, you're doing really well. You really are. And so if there's something that you're being hard on yourself about that you think you should have been achieving that you're not, or you should be doing that you're not, um, maybe it's just not the right thing for you. That's always a possibility. It's not necessarily that you're procrastinating or not motivated enough or whatever it is. So just some ideas to entertain as you listen to Gwen explain quantum human design and its many, many facets. Enjoy. All right, Gwen Dittmar, welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. I'm really excited for this.
Thank you for having me, Meredith. Exciting
Okay.
with you.
So today we are going to talk a lot about human design. And I love any kind of framework. And I know human design is much more than just a framework, but I love anything that gives people a way to understand themselves and understand other people that makes life flow a little more easily. So from what I've heard about human design, I'm so excited to dive into that for that reason.
That's a really great way of explaining it. And I would say that's what I experience. And I know a lot of my clients experience once they hear about their design and a lot of the nuances, as well as once they hear about other people. That's why I love doing one-on-one sessions. I also love doing a human design embodiment group, because when a group of people come together, we
Mhm.
know that like when two or more are present, there's an
Mhm.
energy that's even greater than us that is present. And so I think a lot of people get to learn about themselves, but then they also get to learn, wow, that's my experience, but listening to this person and the type or the profile or the, authority, the way they're supposed to make decisions or engage in the world,
Mhm.
gosh, that makes so much sense. Like I thought this was the only way, right? Like my way
Yes.
was the way everybody feels. And so I think it's so enlightening, and it brings compassion and forgiveness, and I think like validation for ourselves as well as for like other people in our lives. So that's why I also love doing human design with couples, with people that are working together like you and I. I looked up our chart, right? And how it works together,
Oh, right.
ways that couples, families, siblings, coworkers, teams. I love working with teams and companies because there's interesting frequency dynamics that come when we are with other people. It's like the greatest way to learn
Mhm.
in relationship. We can learn in a very safe way by ourselves, but start introducing other people into the mix, and that
Yeah.
starts to get interesting, right?
Yes. And what is life if we don't have to mix in with all those other people?
Yes.
So anything that can support that and make it feel more fun and easy, I'm like really a big fan of.
Well,
So,
I would
yeah.
say that our charts together,
Hmm.
we have, when we bring our charts and overlap them together, we create 8 defined channels and like energy centers, and we'll get into this more when we go through yours. And then there's one that's open. So when there's 8 and 1, it's called have some fun. So I love that you just, right? There was some quantum energy inside of you that's tuned into our frequencies together. And you said, like, this is gonna be fun, right? We're gonna have some
That's
fun.
That's hilarious. Yeah, and it's funny as I was saying that, I'm like, why did I choose those words? That's weird. I wouldn't have thought I'd say it that way.
And that's the other
There
thing
we
I
go.
love about human design, and that I love about your work and what you're sharing with individuals, is that we are quantum frequency beings. So it's like when people look at their chart, there's this interesting thing that happens. Yes, you're looking at information. Yes, it's a tool that gives you a deeper understanding about yourself, like you said, and maybe other people. It also is a transmission. There is a frequency that activates when you look at your design. So whether you look at it once and then you don't revisit it for 5, 10 years. I had a client
Mm.
yesterday who's actually translating a lot of my materials into Spanish so that we can start to expand it. And she said that she found human design 20 years ago, but just, and she said there were little seeds that would pop over time, but she didn't really fully understand it. And to me, like, that's the embodiment of it. Like, yes, it's information that you could get a reading, but I
Mhm.
call it an activation, because there's something that does, like, frequency, quantum, a transmission that
Yeah.
activates inside of you, and your body responds to it like, oh, right. Like that's the incarnation. That's the truth and the essence of who I really am. Like, let's learn more about that and be able to be
Yes.
in the world.
Yes. That kind of, yeah, that body response. And we talk a lot about how our cells are in continuous communication with our physical environment, our light environment, our sound environment. But of course, when we get information that activates some kind of inner knowing, or even in a more mundane way, like, when you're listening to someone speak and they say something and you're like, oh, and you get the goosebumps and it just hits home. Like that would be a kind of quantum activation too, in this sense.
And even, I pull a card before I do sessions with clients, and I wanted to pull a card today before you and I pulled the black egg, which like to me is just this like deep, and it has a lot to do with speaking from the authentic voice, speaking from the quantum of our frequency that comes up and out like in like Coco
Mm,
world. So I just thought like, wow, what
wow.
a hard for us together.
That's so funny. I was listening to something on YouTube yesterday, and it's not the type of thing I usually listen to. And they were talking about using such things as cards or other tools, and how they're just tools that it's your energy. You're the instrument, and it's your energy, but you can use these tools like cards, like pulling a card, to allow that energy to give you messages. And I was like, okay, whatever. And literally the woman was like, so it's important to understand you can do this and you can do it with confidence and clarity. And as she paused, and then she paused, and I was driving listening to this, it was a beautiful, clear day. Everything, I wasn't near anything wet. And all of a sudden, right after her pause, my windshield wipers went, uh-uh. Like a little like, listen to her. I was just like,
Yeah.
what? And that they were off. Everything was off. There was no moisture that could have sparked them to do that. But I was in my mind trying to decide if I would take this pull a card thing seriously. And they went, and now here you are with a beautiful
Pulling a
card to get us
card.
going.
I love it. And I do. I really appreciate you sharing that too, because I think it's important to have healthy skepticism. I would have healthy skepticism before I started, doing a lot of different things. And I remember one of my most favorite um, fortune cookie. I still have it. It said, "Doubt is the beginning of wisdom." And I think as long as we're
Yeah.
open and we're willing and we're curious to either be accurate in what we thought or inaccurate and to learn something new and to open to something new, I think skepticism and doubt are beautiful, right? And so it's like to
Yes.
me that's an example of that where you said, okay, I have my preconceived notions about this. I have my own thoughts. I'm also very open. Show me truth. Show me more will be revealed.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the spirit that's brought us to this new paradigm of the intersection of quantum physics and biology. That's the way of being, where when I first heard like, oh, maybe you need to, block blue light and go outside more, and my mind was like, what? That can't be, like, that's not an answer. But there
And
was
I
a
know
part
that.
of,
Oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
Yeah,
No,
no, there's a part of me that was like, but I'm willing to try because I've got nothing else. Like I'm up against a wall. And then you try, and then the results of those efforts give you the feedback you need.
yes. And what's so cool is I know we'll get to it a little bit later, but since it's present right now, your human design, we all have 9 energy centers. We'll get into what that is. But when we have energy centers that are colored in, or what we call defined,
Hmm.
sometimes people also call it a closed center. But I think sometimes there's a negative connotation to that like
Right.
I'm closed, it means I'm not open. There's something bad.
Right. Like shut down, closed.
So it
Okay.
doesn't necessarily mean closed, that you're limited or there's, any fault there. It just means that you have definition. You
Okay.
are not like an open sponge. And so wherever we have definition means that we have our own energy. We have our own way of being there. It's our own operating system. And where we are not defined, we're open, right? There can be
Mm.
things that can come in and we can receive it, and it can flow in and out, or sometimes we can hold it when we don't necessarily need to or want to hold it. So you have 2 of your centers that are really about messages from the divine, and also then how we bring those messages from the divine down into our thinking and our thoughts, right? So while this center is in chakras, right, the third eye, it has a lot to do with our spiritual eye. Human design, it's a little bit similar, but it also really has a lot to do with the way we think, how we think,
Okay.
why do we
Yeah.
think the way we do. And so both of those centers are defined for you. So
Mm.
it makes sense that maybe for you, you have some of your own thoughts about things. And maybe for you, like those thoughts kind of like are the way they are. So if someone like you, just because we have definition somewhere and we kind of have our own energy, it doesn't also mean that we can't learn to be open. We can't watch a mentor or somebody in our life who has that openness, and we can also tap into that frequency of what does it feel like if I'm not defined there, even though that's my natural essence.
Mm-hmm.
Also open and expand myself and embody this open-mindedness while still honoring the truth of like what I incarnated in here to be. So I think like maybe that's why, right? There's just like some thoughts of like, no, it can't be turning off
Yeah.
lights or not looking at my iPad like you talked about on my podcast,
Yeah.
or right, going outside and looking at the sun in the morning. But there was some part of you that was open, right? And you do have
Mm-hmm.
open centers in your design that allows you to kind of tap into those frequencies, right? And
Mm.
um, maximize, right? Or really utilize that openness. So I just want to preface too, like with human design, and I think with any modality, whether it's yoga or meditation or recovery or anything, it's like I think there can be high and low frequencies to any modality. And I think there can also be a tendency to go into black and white thinking in any modality versus kind of staying in the middle and really staying fluid, right? So it's like
Yeah.
human design, I think some people, and it's very natural when you first learn it, that you can get a little attached to like, oh, I have a closed, third eye anja. So that just means I think the way I think, and like that's just kind of what it is. Or, oh, I have an open solar plexus, which in human design is all about your emotions. So it's like, oh, like I don't like confrontation. I feel everything from other people. That feels uncomfortable for me. Like that's the way I am. And I just want to offer to individuals that are listening or that are learning about their design that it also doesn't have to be just one thing or the other. So even though you are a manifestor or a manifesting generator or a projector and you have more energy or you need to rest more, you can also like tune in and sample other flavors of what it's like to be another person while still honoring the true essence of your frequency and what your soul incarnated here to experience, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And thank you for bringing that up, because I do think, yeah, I've definitely experienced that. We want we want to make it all about the thing, right? Especially when it's new. And I think that's probably part of learning, right? Like when you to really understand something, you do need to kind of be all about that thing. But then at a certain point, it's like the all or nothing has to give way. So I see that too. Like people come in and study the quantum biology stuff, and they're like, should I just like throw out everything I've ever learned and like not be a yoga teacher anymore, or not be a pelvic floor specialist anymore, and just like or not be a doctor anymore and just do this? And it's like, no. It's about integrating it, but it does kind of take over your mind when you learn a new thing. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate you bringing that up, because yeah, we do want to remember that fluidity. That's a great word. Yeah.
And it is great. It's a great reminder that sometimes that is part of like the learning curve. And I don't know about you, but I see this like as a coach, especially when I'm doing more trauma informed work or, breath work healing, shamanic energy healing, that you know, boundaries become really important. And so we can kind of swing on the other end of the pendulum of like fierceness with our boundaries and, you know, no
Yeah.
wiggle. And I
Yeah.
think, you know, like you said so eloquently, it is part of the natural evolution that sometimes if we've been way over here with our boundaries, we do need to kind of come over here and really learn what it means to say no and to not have guilt or fear and to love ourselves first. And then we can start to kind of come, the pendulum can slowly come back into the middle. And then I think it's inevitable that we have little experiences in our life where we swing over here,
Yes.
reminded, oh, right,
Yeah.
come back into
Oh,
the
right. That's what it was like to
right.
have no
And I think
boundaries
that's
or,
part of the human
yeah.
experience. And to me, like that is the quantum, right? It's just
Yeah.
like beautiful ebb and flow versus like I have to be this or I need to
Mhm.
be my design and I can't be anything outside of my human design. And it's really fun. It's really fun
Yeah.
to share. It's a really cool modality.
I love it. Okay, let's get into it. And I also love what you said about that pendulum being the human experience, because in the health and wellness space too, it's like I have to figure out exactly like the perfect way to do things and do things that way all of the time, and and then I'm finally going to get better. And it's like, yeah, it's as you said, it's a journey,
And
and
I
we're
think
in and out of all the time. Yeah.
yeah, and there's certain people I think that are just, and also human design, we can, I don't know how to turn that off. I am so,
Okay.
I've shut it down and turned it off so many times, but I've surrendered to it at this point. I apologize.
No
But
problem.
yes, so it is like really, you know, there's certain places in the design too where it's connected to different parts of our body and different health states and different emotional states. So there's so much that we can see about ourselves from the chart of where you're open, where you're defined. Usually where you're open, you're going to be more absorbent of other energies.
Mm.
So if you're open in your G center, right, which is all about our identity, those individuals could be more prone, especially if they also have the emotional center open, they could be a little bit more prone to being codependent or losing themselves or becoming
Mm.
enmeshed or prioritizing other people's wishes or emotions over their own. So it's not that that makes us bad or wrong. It's just like,
Mhm.
wow, I actually have had that experience in human life.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot of people feel like, wow, there's nothing wrong with me. Like this is
Mhm.
kind of the frequency and the essence that my soul chose to incarnate and to experience in this lifetime. So how can I learn to be with that? How can I learn to love that openness of my identity, the fluidity, right? All the different types of friendships and groups that I'm a part of, but maybe I'm never fully a part of one. And then also that openness on my emotions that I can feel the temperature in a room. I can be somewhat so empathic and compassionate that I lose myself. So, like, how
Mm.
can I start to reel that back in while honoring the beauty and the gifts, the higher frequencies of those open centers, and also learning about the lower frequencies of having those open centers? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's just start from the basics and what is human design?
So, human design is a philosophy. I would say it was really a download, it was a channeling from a man. He renamed himself Ra Uru Hu. He had a mystical experience in 1987. It was non drug induced. He was in Ibiza, Spain. And he really started to download how all of these ancient philosophies were interconnected and how they
Okay.
laid down on top of one another and could give us so much information about ourselves, about our relationships, about the state of the world and how we interact, you know, in the whole frequency of the world. And So he started to write all this information down, and then he started to write books, and then slowly started to teach. And so it encompasses Vedic astrology,
Mhm.
quantum physics, the Hindu chakra system. It also encompasses the Chinese I Ching hexagram, as well as the Kabbalah tree of life. And
Okay.
so it has, you know, an interesting kind of, when you look at, you'll see some images of human design. It's like a circle. It has a lot of different circles with a lot of information. And then it has what looks like what would be a human body,
Mhm.
a head, you know, a third eye, a throat, something right here that looks like what it would be the heart. But then there's also something that's like a little bit over here, and then another center down below, down at the root, and then two centers over on either side. So it does take information from the chakra system, but instead of just staying with 7 chakras, there is a philosophy, and that's why I think it's quantum, is that we are evolving as a species. And so we're not going to just stay with 7 chakra systems. We're going to, you know, these chakras are going to advance and they're going to grow, and they might even split. So that's why there's one that's in the center that looks like it would be the heart, but it's actually one that's called the G center. And it
Mhm.
has, because humans evolved as a species from having just a heart of like, my heart is in this, you know, my heart is for my tribe, my heart is to kill the bear. And it started to evolve into, okay, yes, we have heart, we have willpower, we have discipline. So that's the one that kind of moved down over to the side of like, yes, heart, will, determination, discipline. But then this one started to shift into, gosh, like, who am I? What am I?
Mhm.
What's important to me? What do I value? What do I love? What loves me? What's my worthiness? You know, what's my enoughness? And so we also had another split in humanity where instead of just having the solar plexus right underneath of, you know, the heart, the solar plexus also split into two. So now we have something that's called the spleen, and it's all about primal, right? So that's kind of what we would think would be the original solar plexus chakra turned into what's more of now the spleen, which is like gut, primal instinct, intuition, deep knowing, a lot of times connected to, you know, fear, connected to time, because we know from our primal ancestors that um, you know, if there was fear of a bush and a berry, it was important to follow that. It was important to be connected to that and to not eat that berry, right? For your
Right.
survival. That was
Right.
instinct. But then we kind of evolved as a species of like, yes, that's very important. We need that for time, for safety, for instinct, for that primal knowing. But we're also starting to evolve, and we're starting to have feelings of like, okay, I have fear, but is it really because I'm on the edge of a cliff, or is there fear because there's something that I want to embark on and I'm scared to do it, right? That's very different than like a very primal fear. And so we started to have the solar plexus become more of the emotional center in human design. And then what's really cool is that in our lifetime, we're going to experience another split. So that emotional solar plexus is going to split into another center, and that's really, it's like, it's believed to be that's going to be not just like fear and anger and grief and joy and sadness as human emotions, but there's going to be an evolved experience of emotions. So I'm not sure what that's going to be, but I have a feeling that that's why all these modalities of like
Mhm.
consciousness and health and healing and separating out like the primal knowing of like light, turn the lights off, sit by the fire, right?
Mhm.
Oh, you know, I feel sad when I'm sitting by the fire. Oh, why am I feeling sad? Oh, because it's bringing up nostalgia, or it's bringing up my childhood, or it's bringing things that I missed and I lost. And then we're going to evolve into like, okay, yes. And what are some of the other senses? maybe it's going to be the clairs, maybe it's going to be, this evolved way of us being. And I think that's why we're like going through all these big transitions right now, is because we're learning about, yes, this is primal. Yes, it's important to know how you feel, but also not to be consumed by how you feel, because it's also just information. It's not your whole experience, right? It's like not getting lost in it, like, oh wow, look at that, there's fear. And I think that's why somatic work and being trauma informed and right health consciousness and healing is such a huge wave right now, is because we're building and we need to know these things in order to then be able to evolve as a species into the next way of being. And then we'll probably do what we said earlier in the podcast. We'll probably pendulum for a while, maybe
Yeah.
hundreds of years, if we don't kill the earth or ourselves before that. And then we'll start to really tap into this higher state, I think, of who we are. But those are just philosophies and thoughts. So we have all
Wow.
these centers.
Mhm.
And I've studied with Karen Curry Parker, and she really coined the term quantum human design. She studied with Ra Uru Hu. She worked with him. She spent a lot of years. And so she really felt like, yes, I value my teacher's work. And
Mhm.
I feel like there's also more that's being revealed to us, right? So for her, quantum human design is more of a language that's designed to help us speak and experience into our potential, right? Into our
Yeah.
expansion of not just like, yes, this is who we are, but also we have the ability to co-create, like we talked about in the beginning, like,
Mhm.
yes, this is who I am. And I can also tap into all these other frequencies of who I am, even if that's not what's just printed in my chart. So
Right.
I value learning and studying through her because, she has a lot of different life experiences. Like she was a nurse, she was a teacher, she's been, into human design. She's done lots of different things, and she brings like a different philosophy into human design. I do tend to use the traditional terms though that Ra used.
Okay.
She's kind of changed some of the terms into her own languaging, but I tend to be more of like follow the
Mhm.
book type of person. So I
Yeah.
use the original terms that Ra used. So the foundations of human design are that we have, I would always say, like the four foundations. So it's about there's different types of human design. There's 5 different types. There are different what's called authorities, and authorities are how you are best to make decisions. And we have different types. So for you, right, your ideal way of making decisions, I did run a bunch of different charts because you weren't 100% sure in your time. And so
Yeah.
it seemed fairly consistent. Interestingly, that doesn't always happen. But your type of making decisions is known as pure or known as sacral. So it's really important for you to come down to your sacral center, not your
Mhm.
intuition in your gut, but more of like this, like your sacral is more of this vibration. It's this sensation. It's kind of the like, like when you hum, it's like you can feel it, right? We know
Mhm.
sacral center also shows up in our throat, that when we hum, we feel that energy moving in our sacral, and vice versa. It's really hard to do, let's say, like something like Kegels and talk at the same time because those muscles are working together. So,
Okay.
so it's like important for you to come down to your sacral to make decisions and ask it yes or no questions. Like, do I want to do human design? Yes or no? Do I want to have Gwen on the podcast? Yes or no? Like, do I want to go to Gwen's podcast? Yes or no? And just being able to ask yourself those yes or no questions and really feel the like, or the right? Or like,
Right.
yes, or the no. That's really where, so we all have different ways of making decisions. Um,
Okay.
and that's called your authority. There's also what's known as your profile number. And so your profile number really has a lot to do with kind of like your personality and what you're here for, how you're going to be experiencing. And I would almost even say maybe the ideal experience for your human life. So we all have different combinations of what those numbers are. So yours is known as a 2-4. So the 2 is known as the hermit, and the 4 is known as the opportunist. So the 2, the hermit, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're introverted. My son is very extroverted and he is a 2-4. But the 2, the hermit, needs time alone. It really needs significant time alone. And like 2, that could mean that you go into a different room or you go away and you actually need to be totally alone. It also, a 2 could also be very happy sitting on the sofa and your partner sitting on the other sofa and just being quiet, right? And being able to be alone, even if you're in the presence with another person. But it's important for 2s to have that so they can integrate what is happening and then and the hermit energy also is it's double benefit. So it's like when you pull away into your hermit, not only does it support you and serve you, but sometimes a low frequency of the 2 is that you could stay there too long and then you could start to isolate and you could become alone and you could become lonely. So what happens is that when the hermit goes into that energy, other people start to become very curious, right? It's like, where did Meredith go? Why, what is she up to? Right. And maybe you like hermited into the quantum biology stuff and people in like coaching are like, where is she? What's going on? Right. So it's like, it's beautiful because then when people start going, when you take that time for yourself, people start to look, where is she? And that pulls you back out.
Mm.
Right? Because
Yeah.
like, where are you? What are you doing? Are you there? And then that kind of gives you this energy to come back out. And it's just this, again, this really beautiful ebb and flow. The 4, so sometimes the profile is called a line 2 and a line 4. So what your 4 is your 4 is known as the opportunist. And the opportunist is someone who really does well from like having community, having connections, your network, and getting opportunities through your network, through your community. So you'll find more success. Like if you try to push yourself when you're really feeling the need to go in, or if when you're in, you kind of don't pay attention to your community pulling you back out, you're going to notice things don't work as well in your life. And then when you are not going to your community, right? You're going to, so it might be better for you to do this human design this way through, connections, right? Like I'm friends with Perry, and then I saw some kind of connections between the 2 of you. And then like we got connected, and then you're doing human design this way. That probably you'll be more receptive just because of your frequency to experience the human design versus if you went outside of your network or you just like cold called somebody and say, hey,
Right. Just like jumped on Google and put
yes,
human design in the box and see who
yes,
popped up.
yes. So for people that have a 4, like I've had clients that have come to me, oh, I want to find love and partnership. I'm like, great, like as a coach, I'm like, great, let's like work on that. And human design has given me this amazing tool to support people because someone with a line 4 is not going to find success most likely on dating apps. Now, I don't want to be black or white,
Yeah.
right? But like that's not your community. You'll be
Right.
more successful telling your community, hey, I'm ready to date. Hey, I'm ready to call in love. Hey, I'm open for experiences now. And you'll find better opportunities come to you through your network. And then, so those are the first 3. And then the next one that's really important, which is part of the foundations, is I say it's your strategy. So your strategy is how you're best to engage in life. There's different types of strategies depending on the type that you are. So
Okay.
for
So
you,
there's types, which is like,
that's manifesting generator, projector, manifestor, and reflector. And you are a manifesting generator. So the reflectors are about 1% of the population, roughly. Manifestors are about 7% of the population. That's what my type is. Then there were generators, projectors, which are about 20%. And then there were generators. Now, there was a split that happened because humans started to evolve. And so these four main types, then there was a new type that was birthed into existence. And it's a blend of the manifestor plus the generator. So
okay.
generators now make up about 35% of the population, and manifesting generators make up about 35%. So together they make up about 70% of the way our frequency of our world operates. And the reason
Mhm.
it makes these different than these other three is that these two have what's known as that sacral energy. You're always going to
Okay.
have that center defined. These other types won't ever have that sacral center defined. They're going to be totally open there. And so
Okay.
that's why a lot of times people chunk these two together, is because they both function off like, and they have that sacral energy. Now, there's lots of
And
different.
what is it? What are the sort of qualities of
Yes,
those types? Like, what are they like? And we're talking most people here. So
yes, this is broad generalization.
broad, yes, yes.
Because now you can see that with the other foundations, there can be lots of different nuances. So just because you're a manifesting generator doesn't necessarily mean that like all manifesting generators are going to be the same. Like for
Mhm.
instance, my daughter is a manifesting generator, so is my son, but my daughter only has two centers defined. She's very open. And so her energy is a lot more like a projector, and then her profile number, which is a 5-1, makes her even more kind of less like a manifesting generator, even though she has that sacral energy. So
Okay.
what makes these energies different is that because you have that sacral center, you have consistent energy. You have consistent life force moving through you. Generators are going to have kind of more of a slow, steady, like I would like to think of a car, just like just an average car that can just really go slow and steady for a long time, versus a manifesting generator, which is what you are, right? Is going to be very lit up by something that they're interested in. They're going to going to go fast and furious. Sometimes they might miss steps, key essential
Mhm.
steps, but it's just kind of because they move really fast. So sometimes the learning is to slow down a little bit while also still honoring the desire to move fast, to move quick, to kind of switch gears. So manifesting generators it's like you're allowed to not have to niche yourself and stay in that for the rest of your life. Manifesting generators like do something and they do it, and then they're like, okay, it's time to go over here, right? And then they do
Yeah.
that, and then it's time to go over here. It also doesn't mean that manifesting generators can't work in a long-term position. So for instance, my ex-husband is a manifesting generator, but he's had like the same type of position for many, many years. And probably why that works is because he does lots of different things in that one position. So it's very fulfilling, right?
Mhm.
There's like going here, going there, being able to move fast, fast, fast. So also what's really important for you, because I was thinking like, oh wow, I kind of thought maybe you would be more of a non-sacral type. They're gonna feel like they don't have the same energy resources that these other types, these other generative sacral types do, because they don't have that consistent engine running, right? So it's like
Mhm.
they can drive for a few miles and then they have to stop. And reflectors have a very different way of working and resting than manifestors and projectors. Projectors tend to need like breaks and rest a lot during the day because they don't have that constant life force energy. So they will be less likely to do 9 to 5 jobs because that requires that you go, nonstop. They're going to probably, a lot of the non-sacral types will tend to get sick burnout, adrenal fatigue, get something that causes them to just stop, usually between like 30 to 40, because
Mm,
they've tried to function and they were taught and conditioned to operate like a generative type, because 70% of our world functions this way. It's kind of hard
yeah,
to function as a non-generative type in a generative world.
right.
And we're so conditioned to that way that they then usually like crash and hit that that
Yeah.
out, and then they kind of have to learn like, oh, my energy does need to take a break in the middle of the day, and whether I work in a corporate job or not, I'm going to have to figure out how to do that for myself, right?
Right.
And then
And
they
I think this is really important too, because especially, and this is why I love these kinds of frameworks, right? To help us understand ourselves. Because especially in the health and wellness space, I think a lot of us have this idea, like if I get my light right, I get my food right, I get everything right, like I'm just going to be able to go at a certain speed, at a certain pace all of the time. And what I love about the quantum biology is that it actually is about we become more in touch with ourselves. We become more in tune with what our needs are. So there may be some baseline things, you know, eating well and having a good circadian rhythm that are foundationally healthy for everybody. But then what we do with that is very individual, and we keep looking outside of ourselves to the podcast and the newest supplement and what pathway is this going to activate and what am I going to do so that I can somehow reach this energy goal that might not be mine from what you're saying.
Yes. And what's so cool is that, like in human design, there's also very specific information for each person of like how they're supposed to eat, when they're supposed to eat, what types of food they're supposed to eat, what's really important for them while they're eating, right? So there were a couple differences in your chart around what I call 4 arrows. So like when you look at someone's chart, there's 2 red arrows and there's 2 black arrows. So everything red in someone's human design chart is the unconscious. It's in human design, it's calculated 88 days before you're born is when it's believed that your unconscious drops into your body. So unconscious are things like your digestion, what like environments, it's like very primal, right? What environments feel good to you, your digestion, not only just digesting food and liquids, but also how do you digest ideas? How do you digest traumas? How do you like digest life that happens to you? And then not only just your environment of like, oh, what environment feels good to me? What allows my nervous system to feel really grounded? What allows me to be open, right? Because when we're eating in a way that's right for us, when we're in an environment that's aligned for us, and we're functioning in our environment in a way that's aligned for us, that lets the frequency of your vessel be able to open to the frequency that wants to come through, right? This channel that goes into something greater than us. I don't know what it's called, but it's called something. And so when you're really honoring these unconscious parts of you, then you're able to open to like this like huge consciousness portal of how do you perceive things, and everybody's different in how they do that too. So it's like,
Right.
what's the ideal way for you to manifest is going to be different for you than it is for me. And what's going to like, how does your cognition work, and what's going to be your motivation through your unique perspective when you're nourishing yourself, that's unique to you, and that's going to allow you to tap into that quantum frequency. And then once you're tapped into that quantum frequency, we all have very unique ways of receiving information, of downloading information, of assimilating, right, information
Yeah.
from the divine, from outside of us, like inside of us. So those 4 arrows kind of go through those things. I would say that's definitely not foundational stuff. That's like kind of next level stuff. But I would
Okay.
say for people to focus on, you know, these foundations. I mean, anytime you go, and I think you know this to be true as well, like anytime we want to learn more, oftentimes we kind of have to come back to that pendulum of like the basics. And then we can kind of expand out, and then we have to like integrate it, and then we can kind of expand out even farther. So I would say human design is very similar for people that are learning. I tend to see people, and I know I learned the same way, is like foundations, right? And then we feel pulled to call and learn about our centers and what is known as your channels and your gates and these four arrows, right? But
Mhm.
then always want to keep coming back to these foundations, because how you do things as a manifesting generator, how you do things as a sacral being, how you do things with a sacral authority of like, I need to come here to ask questions, right? And then I'm also you're coming and keeping in mind your 2-4 profile, right? Like that's that unique experience of your humanness here. And it's different, right? Your 2-4 is going to be different than my 5-1. And then you're also going to want to just really look at your strategy. So your strategy, most of these sacral beings, their strategy is to respond. And what that really means is like you're going to have more success when you are responding to something outside of you as an initiation to lean into a new way of coaching or quantum biology collective, et cetera, or maybe your next thing, because you're a manifesting generator and you might kind of package up quantum biology or hand it over to a generator, right? To like just
Mhm.
keep going for you, because you're like, oh, actually, this is the thing now. And to allow yourself to move into that direction. And then, you know, you may want to learn more, but like kind of come back to those basics of who you are and integrate what you're learning about yourself into these basics, because these foundations are kind of how you're operating every day, making decisions, being, you know, strategizing and being in action in your life. You're going to be so much more successful when you respond versus if you try to push and initiate something. Um,
Yes, that
and so
lines up with my life experience for sure.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so when people get to just settle into their natural rhythm versus
Hmm.
force themselves to be like what they've been conditioned to be, or what society tells us we need to be, then it's like there's infinite freedom, because then
Yes.
you get to just be you and operate in the world, and then you also get to you operate and honor other people for who they are, and that they don't have to be like you. So it's like it's been a huge I would just say like opening when I'm like supporting clients, because
Hmm.
I don't like look at, hey, this worked for me, like you're going to do this. I look at them and I say, actually, you're not really intended to post on social media every day, or you really do need to I don't know, like tap into fear, right? Some people have fear as their motivation. It's not the fear that we know the word to be. In, hu-
Right.
in human design, Ra used words to wake people up. That was part of his human
Hmm.
design. His human design was here to initiate, inform, and wake people up, kind of shake them out of the slumber. So a lot of the words in human design sound negative, like your motivation is fear, your sense is judgment, right? Your view is called probability. So it's like those words could have negative, you know, meaning to them based on our society and the way we use words, but actually, like, it's not that you're motivated by fear, or let's say for somebody they're motivated by hope or they're motivated by guilt. It just means that there's for fear, it's like you really need to make sure everything's okay, right? Like
Yeah.
had a husband and wife, both doctors, right? Lots of medical school loans, and they wanted to buy a home. And she had hope as her as her motivation. So she was just like, it's all going to work out. Like, I promise it's all going to work out. And they would just constantly, butt heads. And he would say, well, yeah, but we need to make sure that we have enough, and we need to make sure that we're okay, or we need to make sure everything's taken care of before we do that. And it was that he wasn't trying to be negative or like bring the energy down. It was just that's his motivation. And he really needs to honor that. He really needs to be honored for that
Mhm.
motivation. And then use that to come to the higher frequency, right? To come to
Right.
the answers, come to the solutions, because that's the beauty of what that person's bringing to the table. Just as
Yes.
the beauty of someone who's bringing hope, or someone who's
Right.
bringing guilt. Guilt is really motivated by helping others. So there's so much that we can learn both about our health and our relationships, our intuitive gifts, like our businesses, the way we work, our money, what our soul incarnated here for. There's just so much like in human design that
Yeah.
we can
Oh,
use.
it's so rich. I mean, there's just so much in there. And I love like the essential message that I'm hearing, which is, as we've been talking about, right? Like it's a way to understand and honor who we are. And I love your example about the social media, right? Because we have um a lot of people in our community who are uh practitioners or transitioning to be practitioners, and they're like, I have to post on social media all the time. And some people are like, yeah, great. And they just start doing it. And it's like, they're like, yeah, I just started. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to do that. And whatever that. Yeah, I got some clients this way. And then there are other people who like, they sit with the concept of Instagram and they're just frozen. Right. And
Yes,
it's like, and then they feel like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. I'm supposed to be on social media. And it's like, that might not be your thing. And that's okay.
right. Yes. And I mean, I love supporting people and being able to be in their relationships, be in their body. Another big thing is like rituals, like you were talking about the health industry, learning how to do, like, some people are not meant to do the same. They're not meant to wake up and do the gratitude journal. And well, we could debate that, look at the
Mhm.
light, but take the cold shower, do the meditation, do the lymphatic massage. Like, there are some people that really it's best for them to honor what they need to do. So maybe, yes, they
Mhm.
do need to do something to serve themselves first thing in the morning, but to be able to have flexibility and to be able to honor what's really fluidly moving through them, versus some people do really well when they have a very more structured, um, kind of consistent thing that they do. And so it's like,
Yes.
even coaching somebody and giving them permission, you don't have to write in your gratitude journal every morning. And they're like, oh my God, thank God. That feels like such relief to me. And that feels more natural for me. I'm like, yeah, because it is. That's your frequency. And so, okay, maybe you're not going to write in the gratitude journal, even though I think that's huge and really important for people that are trying to shift out of victim and into empowerment. So it's like, okay, let's find some other things that you could just scroll down the list each morning and say, oh, yeah, I really feel like doing that today. Just do one thing, but you get to choose and have freedom. That's going to allow people to feel more in their true essence. And then that's going to allow them to open up to this like higher frequency, right? And open into this quantum possibility. So there's just so much with human design.
So
We
much
we
there.
might even have to do
Yeah.
like a
Might have
separate.
to do part two on
Yeah,
this journey to trusting ourselves through understanding. Well, thank you so much, Gwen. I know you have to run. You have many clients waiting for your support and wisdom on this topic. So thank you so much for sharing it with us. What a gift.
thank you so much for the opportunity. It was lovely to sit with you and to be
Okay.
in our authentic voices together.
Yes, I appreciate it. You have a very empowering presence, and I appreciate that, Gwen. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. To find a practitioner who practices from this point of view, visit our directory at quantumbiologycollective.org. If you are a practitioner, definitely take a look at the Applied Quantum Biology Certification, a 6-week study of the science of the new human health paradigm and its practical application with your patients and clients. We also love to feature graduates of the program on this very podcast. Until next time, the QBC.